Hey, what's going on, Archons? Welcome to another edition of KeyThoughts, my weekly musings of this great game of KeyForge. Today on the books, we have a little bit of my thoughts on the new KeyForge Adventures Keyraken, which I've had the pleasure of playing 3 times. And as well, I'm going to go into the concept of what I call chase cards. And am I right in that logic behind phrasing it in that way? So we're going to go into that and then finish off with the card of the week. And and one more thing is a new format I'm going to do for my videos, because I just have the pleasure and privilege of having an abundance of decks. So I thought a new way of going about opening decks will be to make it a new format for all of them. So more on that later on in the episode. But first, before we go any further, I just want to give some shout outs to my latest Patrons, which is Place and Time and my man Steve Kingswell. Thank you so much for your pledges and for becoming part of the draw for next month, which I think will probably include a Dark Tidings deck without a doubt. Actually, maybe not. You'll see with the new format coming out, that may not be the case, but we shall see. But without further ado, let's go into what I just talked about. Actually, let's talk about this new format that I wanted to start doing on the channel. So I happen to have an abundance of decks right now, displays as you can see, a lot actually. Great sales coming my way. I have every set here now, so all 5, and what I think I'm going to do is take 3 from each set and basically use that as a means to put a collective of decks in a bag, and it's basically going to be a bag of decks. Yeah, that's right, a bag of decks. That's decks, D-E-C-K-S. Okay guys, come on, stay with me here. And I'm going to basically pull one randomly when I do my videos, and we will not know which set it's going to be necessarily as we go through. It's just going to be like a random draw, a different set coming out and unboxed and looked at, and I think it's going to be an interesting way. Instead of having a dedicated you know what set's coming, it's going to be a surprise, and I want to see how that works. And maybe we'll even do some would you rathers with that, where pull 2 decks out of the bag and you're going to see which set it's from, and then which one would you rather have, going in set by set comparison instead of both from the same set, which I think will be an interesting exercise. So I'm really excited to be able to do that and to utilize this abundance of decks that I have, as well as being able to use this as a means of having a more surprise giveaway. In order to do this, I'm going to actually have to open the packs and drop them in without looking into the bag, just because of the fact that Dark Tidings is now in a foil wrapper instead of cardboard, so it'd be very obvious when I'm grabbing a Dark Tidings deck when I'm reaching in there. So that's the way I think I'm going to mitigate that, is just go about it by putting it in a way that is kind of, they're all there and you just feel the deck themselves in its wrapping, and explore that way. So I'm excited for that, which will probably start launching next week. Next up, I want to talk about the Keyraken and my thoughts on it so far. So the Keyraken is the first installment of a new format in KeyForge, for those who don't know, which is to have KeyForge played in a solo or co-op mode in an LCG style, so I'm going to call it, where there's an opponent, which is a deck that auto-generates, auto-populates, and does its own thing without making any decisions, so to speak, in terms of sequencing. It just auto does what the cards say. And it's a lot of fun. I'm a big fan of the FFG LCGs thus far. I have all 3 of the previously most popular ones, which is Lord of the Rings, Arkham's Horror, and of course Marvel Champions, which are a ton of fun. And so it's cool to have KeyForge in this way. I particularly love it just because of the fact that you can't build decks, you have to discover decks, which is such a unique part of KeyForge. If you're interested in more on this topic, you definitely need to check out the Help from Future Self episode coming out tomorrow, because Sydney and I go into it in depth since we both played, and you'll get to hear more on that. But I do think this is a great thing. I think it's a lot of fun and a different way that you can just enjoy KeyForge on your own and utilize some of your decks that you may not have in the past. And on that note, I definitely think that your strongest decks may not always be the best against this, but I think this is a good opportunity to find lesser decks, because there is a thing that you once you figure out the meta, so to speak, of Keyraken, it's much easier to beat than you would think. And so once you have that cracked, you need to find some ways to elevate your own experience, like take control of your own play experience and give yourself a challenge, as Dr. Garfield says. So just use your lesser decks to figure that out. And moving on to the topic of chase cards. Well, I've been thinking about this a lot, and what is the concept of chase cards? Is that a correct term? Because I'm now realizing that early on in the game, that symbol that we had, which is basically like a diamond with a circle in the center removed, it's kind of made you think that that symbol results in chase cards in a way because of what was early on associated with it. So that being the time traveler and help from future self combo, you have the horseman, and then you move on to the next set of AOA, and we got Ortanu. So there's just these things that existed that make you feel like, oh, that's a chase card. But now I think as we've gone further into the sets and we've seen things that happen, I don't think they're necessarily all chase cards, things you're looking to get. I think what they actually are, and I'm sure this is what it is, and I was just incorrect, is that those are the procedurally generated cards. Those are cards that exist because something else exists. And that's very unique to KeyForge, because in order for this card to appear, something else in this deck must exist. And I just love that concept and that idea in KeyForge, and the way we're seeing it more and more. Like, obviously some are a little bit hokey, we can say, like all the plants that existed were a little bit hokey, but they were fun still. They added a level of uniqueness that is inherent to KeyForge. And so I just really like that we have that, and it's just so cool. So I'm guessing how it works is the cards that do not have that special quote unquote procedurally generated or chase symbol, they basically that part of the card, when that gets inserted into a deck through the algorithm, it triggers the procedural generated card to follow it, which is really cool. And obviously Time Traveler, I think, is the quintessential one that follows this, because you're like, whoa, that's so neat. Because you could think about chase cards as other things as well. Like, obviously Sins fall into this as well, but like Khalifi Dragon to an extent was a chase card, but it didn't have the symbol. It wasn't procedurally generated. So I feel in the past I've used that term and it's been incorrect, because it's the procedurally generated cards that come, and I just love that KeyForge has that aspect to it. I think it's so neat, and I really think that the game designers are looking to explore the ability to utilize this in more and more different ways, and that just makes for greater experiences and play and fun within the game itself. May not always be the most top tier, but it definitely creates the ability to have some unique play experiences and some cool things that are not going to be in any other game, because in other games, if you're building decks, you may not always put those in. So it's pretty cool. And the fact that if you have one, you must have the other for some, that's also really neat as well. Now lastly, let's move on to the cards of the week, which happens to be 2 this time, because you know why? I decided that since we're doing the procedurally generated cards, let's go into 2, and that is these 2 beauties right here. And that is Orpheal's Seas Chosen and Orpheon Lands Chosen. Really cool cards. I'm big fans of these 2. I think they're really neat design choices. And not only that, they provide very interesting decisions in the game itself, because they're both 3-power creatures that are monks. They kind of look like they could be part of the gray sort of thing, so to speak, that's in Sanctum. But the Orpheal's Seas Chosen is basically, it says, while the tide is high, Orpheal's Seas Chosen gains skirmish and fight, gain 2. Then Orpheon's Land Chosen says, while the tide is low, Orpheon's Land Chosen gets +3 armor and gains reap, capture 2. So that's just really interesting to me, that you have a card that you can basically take advantage of the tide to gain 2 different outcomes. One obviously says Lands Chosen, so if the tide is low, it relates to that, and Seas Chosen, when the tide is high, it goes to that. And I just love that we have a procedurally generated card that works that way. And the art is fantastic. The flavor is great for it. And I just like to see things like that exist. I have 2 decks with them now, and I just like the decisions that can be there for them, because having to raise the tide, the thing is you can't lower the tide necessarily to capture. There's very limited card choices in that regard, and I don't think there's any in Sanctum either. So it just makes a very interesting proposition for when you're playing the game, and I'm really enjoying the tide mechanic. I think it is one of the most fun aspects in KeyForge, and I do like how that there are global effects from the tide because of cards, so that even if you do not have a Dark Tidings deck, you can still have a lot of fun with the tide mechanic. So it's just really neat and really enjoyable. So that's going to do it for this week's episode, folks. I really hope you enjoyed it. Tune in tomorrow to the Help from Future Self episode, where it's a deep dive into Keyraken, and now my new streaming time, which is Thursdays on YouTube at 5 Pacific, 8 Eastern, where I'll be jamming a lot of Dark Tidings this week. I got a ton of decks to go through on there, and then you can catch me on Saturday doing a more of a midday stream on Twitch. So yeah, doing 2 days a week now, trying one on YouTube and one on Twitch. I abandoned Tuesday due to low engagement on Twitch, because I think there's just a lot of events going on, which is fine for me. I don't mind moving it to a Saturday. I think that's fun. Maybe more people will watch on the weekend, especially with that little bit earlier time in the day, which can then help the Europeans tune in, who I know have been really gracious, and just really appreciate them tuning in till all hours of the morning and watching the stream. So this will hopefully accommodate that time zone a little bit better. So I appreciate everyone who watches these videos, who likes, who comments, and who supports me through Patreon. Thank you so much. And as always, folks, may your ember never be stolen and your keys forged promptly. Have a good one.